We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too.
President Kennedy back in 1962 speaking about the nation's efforts to reach the moon. Our next guest argues we should learn from Kennedy's moonshot approach to solve the crisis facing our world today. Joining us now, professor at University College London, Mariana Mazzucato. She's the author of the new book entitled Mission Economy, a Moonshot Guide to Changing Capitalism. And Mike Barnacle will take the first question. Mike?
Professor, we are surrounded here in this country with tech outfits that boggle the imagination with all the gifts they provide us instantly that make our lives easier. But are we undervaluing the potential and the value of governments, both state and federal, in terms of bringing more to the table to assist us in expanding our life opportunities?
Absolutely. I mean, we need to be asking ourselves, all these wonderful smart products which we all use and our children's use, well, what makes them smart and not stupid? Internet, GPS, touchscreen, Siri. These were all not only invested in by the public sector, DARPA, the Navy got us GPS, but these were purpose-driven organizations. The internet didn't come about because someone in government obsessed about a technology called the internet. They needed to solve a problem. The satellites needed to communicate. The internet was the answer. Same thing with GPS. So one of the questions I pose in the book is, what are the modern day problems, whether it's around the digital divide, a plastic-free ocean, carbon-neutral cities, that can really galvanize that public-private relationship, because, the moon landing was not just NASA, it was lots of different companies, that can foster technology as a spillover, but we're also really confronting that kind of build back better agenda. In other words, technology and science for the public good. But just one really interesting thing I found in researching the book is that NASA wasn't naive at all when it, partnered with the private sector. There was companies like, General Electric, Motorola, Honeywell. But the design of the partnership had things like a no excess profits clause, or the procurement contract went away from being cost plus, which simply could have, costs coming back to NASA that were really inflated, towards fixed price contracts with incentives for continual innovation and quality improvement. So that build back better agenda, which we all talk about, has to go to the design of the public-private relationship today. Those partnerships need to be symbiotic.
Sam Stein.
Yeah, I hope I don't sound as old as Mike Barnacle just did, railing against the apps on my phone and the didgeridoo and whatever he said. Professor, just a quick question. Doesn't the real problem here just come down to a simple thing, which is automation? Our jobs are being essentially taken away from us because there's just more efficient ways for them to be done through technology, computers, robots. And if that is indeed the crux of the matter, how do you go about changing it? I mean, people like efficiencies in their lives. They want to be able to, hail a taxi cab on their phone, for instance, or produce goods at cheaper rates. And they don't really see the long-term costs that come in the form of human capital.
Good point. I mean, I think there's two parts of my answer to that. First of all, machines, robots, have been taking jobs for 200 years. David Ricardo, the first economist ever, back in 1821, Principles of Political Economy was the first ever textbook. He had a chapter, I can't believe I remember this, chapter 31 called On Machinery, where already back then he was posing that kind of robots are taking our jobs problem. Then what happened for 200 years was that those profits that were being generated from machinery, from industrialization, and slowly these became robots, kept being reinvested back into the economy. So new jobs appeared, new skills appeared. What's happened in the last 20 to 30 years is that stopped. Lots of profits are going out of the economy. They're what I call value extraction. $4 trillion, that's 12 zeros, $4 trillion have been used by the global Fortune 500 companies just to purchase back their shares, to boost stock prices, stock options, and executive pay. That corporate governance problem, which is not a robot problem, is what's hurting American workers. And what's really interesting is that there's a bipartisan agreement on this. When I was last in the U.S., I spoke both to Elizabeth Warren's team and Marco Rubio's team around that problem. So I think this is a really interesting way to kind of rethink what we even mean by our digital platforms and big tech. First of all, a lot of the tech that big tech gets, credited for wasn't actually invented by them. They do wonderful things. Apple had this wonderfully designed, gadgets that we all use, and that itself is value creation. But how do we then govern digital platforms for value creation so that the algorithms themselves don't end up just kind of becoming a rent-seeking algorithm? That requires, for example, a view of competition policy that is not just ex post, but gets those relationships right in the first place. And conditionality around reinvestment is something that I'm seeing globally right now with the COVID-19 recovery schemes. In Denmark and Austria, what's really interesting is companies cannot actually access COVID recovery money unless they stop using tax havens. In France, companies cannot get access to COVID recovery unless they commit to reducing their carbon emissions. So thinking about the Build Back Better agenda in terms of a redesign of the partnership between, say, big tech and government, or big energy companies and government, I think is the opportunity here.
Wow. We need a lot more time for this. You'll have to come back. The new book is Mission Economy, a moonshot guide to changing capitalism. Mariana Mazzucato, thank you so much for being on the show this morning. Congratulations on the book.